Comment where you're watching from today, as we share the story of how an ordinary costume party at an exclusive private school became the setting for an extraordinary lesson about creativity, kindness, and the true meaning of worth. The autumn air was crisp at Westbrook Academy, where the annual Halloween carnival was in full swing. The prestigious private school's courtyard had been transformed into a showcase of elaborate costumes, most of them clearly purchased from high-end boutiques or custom-made by professional designers. Among the crowd of students and parents, it was easy to spot which families belonged to the city's elite and which were there on scholarship. 10-year-old Tommy Chin stood at the entrance, clutching his mother's hand, his homemade Iron Man costume representing countless hours of work with cardboard, paint, and LED lights bought from the dollar store. Sarah Chin, a single mother who worked 2 jobs to keep her son in the academy, had spent every free moment for weeks helping Tommy create his costume, knowing they couldn't afford the store-bought version his classmates would be wearing. What neither of them knew was that this evening would become about much more than just a costume contest. Jason Statham, who had been invited to judge the competition as part of a charity initiative, was running early. The action star had arrived without fanfare, preferring to observe the carnival atmosphere before his official introduction. Dressed casually in a black t-shirt and jeans, Statham blended into the background, watching as families arrived. His trained eye, developed through years of reading people for his roles, noticed the subtle dynamics at play, the way some parents positioned themselves prominently while others tried to remain unnoticed, the careful dance of social status being performed even at a children's costume party. Tommy's Iron Man costume caught his attention immediately. Unlike the perfectly molded plastic and professionally crafted outfits surrounding him, this costume showed something different: creativity, effort, and heart. The LED lights might have been irregular, the cardboard might have shown its edges, but there was genuine artistry in how it had been assembled. Victoria Blackwood, head of the school's parent association, was the first to notice Tommy's costume. Her son Trevor stood beside her in a professionally made Spider-Man costume that probably cost more than Sarah Chen made in a month. Victoria's laugh carried across the courtyard, deliberately loud enough to be heard by those around her. "Oh dear," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. Did someone forget to tell them about Spirit Halloween? Or perhaps they couldn't find it in their budget? The words were clearly meant to carry, to establish her position at the top of the social hierarchy. Sarah Chen's face flushed, but she kept her composure, squeezing Tommy's hand reassuringly. The boy's excitement had already begun to fade, his pride in the costume he had helped create crumbling under the weight of mockery and judgment. "Mom," Tommy whispered, trying to pull back from the entrance, "maybe we should go home. I can say I'm not feeling well." But before Sarah could respond, another parent joined Victoria's performance. "It's really not fair to the other children," the woman said, loud enough to be heard clearly. "This is meant to be a showcase of creativity, not a craft project." Statham, who had been observing quietly, felt his jaw tighten at the casual cruelty being displayed. He had seen this type of behavior before, people using their wealth and status to make others feel small, to establish their superiority through humiliation. Victoria continued her performance, now gathering a small audience of like-minded parents. "Perhaps we should start a fund," she suggested, her voice carrying false sweetness, "to help the less fortunate families participate properly in school events. We wouldn't want anyone to feel out of place." Tommy was fighting back tears now, his earlier excitement about the costume contest replaced by shame. Sarah stood straight, her dignity intact despite the humiliation being heaped upon her and her son, but Statham could see the pain in her eyes. What happened next would transform this ordinary school carnival into something extraordinary, teaching everyone present a powerful lesson about true worth and the real meaning of creativity. But for now, Statham watched as Tommy tried to make himself smaller, to disappear behind his mother as Victoria and her group continued their performance of superiority. The action star had seen enough. Moving away from the wall where he had been observing, he began walking toward the small group. His presence was commanding even in casual clothes, his purpose clear in every step. But before he could reach them, Victoria's performance took an even crueler turn. "Look at those LED lights," she laughed, pointing out specific details of Tommy's costume. I suppose we should be grateful they didn't use Christmas decorations. Oh wait, are those actually dollar store lights? Her group of followers joined in the laughter, each trying to establish their own position in the social hierarchy through mockery of a child's creative efforts. Statham's approach was deliberate, his expression controlled but intense. He had played many roles in his career, fought countless villains on screen, but what he was about to do would prove that sometimes the most powerful acts of heroism happen in quiet moments of standing up for what's right. Sarah Chen had begun to guide Tommy toward the exit, trying to spare her son further humiliation, but Statham's voice, quiet yet carrying authority, stopped them. That's quite a costume, young man. Would you mind showing me how you made it? The simple question, delivered with genuine interest, created a sudden shift in the atmosphere. Victoria's group fell silent, uncertain about this new development. Tommy, still fighting back tears, turned slowly to face the speaker, not yet recognizing who was addressing him. Statham knelt down to examine the costume more closely, his experienced eye noting the careful construction, the creative solutions to technical challenges, the hours of work that had gone into its creation. You know, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, in my line of work, I've seen a lot of costumes. But it's not often I see one with this much thought and creativity put into it. Victoria, not yet realizing who was speaking, attempted to maintain her position of authority. Well, certainly you can't be suggesting that this craft project compares to professionally made costumes? Some of us take these events seriously enough to invest properly in our children's participation. The action star's response would not only silence the mockery but would transform the entire evening into a powerful lesson about value, creativity, and the true meaning of investment in children's development. But for now, he continued examining Tommy's costume, his attention focused on the young boy who was beginning to stand a little straighter, his pride in his creation slowly returning under this unexpected appreciation. What followed would not only change Tommy's evening but would teach everyone present a lesson about the real meaning of creativity, worth, and the power of standing up against casual cruelty. The carnival was about to become something much more significant than a costume contest. It would become a moment of truth about what really matters in supporting and celebrating children's efforts. The autumn evening at Westbrook Academy's Halloween Carnival had grown tense as Jason Statham continued examining Tommy Chen's homemade Iron Man costume. Victoria Blackwood and her group of elite parents watched with growing unease as this stranger in casual clothes paid such careful attention to what they had been mocking moments before. You see these joints here? Statham asked Tommy, pointing to where the cardboard had been carefully engineered to allow movement. That's proper problem solving, that is. Professional costume makers use similar principles, just with different materials. Tommy's eyes began to light up as someone finally noticed the details he was most proud of. Mom helped me figure out how to make them move without breaking, he explained, his voice growing stronger. We watched lots of videos about cardboard engineering. Victoria, still not recognizing who was speaking, attempted to reassert control of the situation. What isn't that twink? But surely you understand that a school of Westbrook's caliber has certain standards to maintain. We can't have every child showing up with homemade crafts. Statham stood slowly, his movement deliberate and controlled. When he turned to face Victoria, his expression was calm but carried an intensity that made her take an involuntary step back. Standards? He repeated quietly. Let's talk about standards. The action star's voice, though never raised, carried across the courtyard with the same authority that had commanded movie sets and captivated audiences worldwide. I've worked with some of the best costume designers in Hollywood. Know what they all have in common? They started by learning to create something from nothing, just like this young man has done. Victoria's face showed the first flickers of uncertainty as she began to realize this wasn't just any random observer. Her son Trevor, still wearing his expensive Spider-Man costume, shifted uncomfortably beside her. But the contest rules. Victoria began weakly, but Statham cut her off with a gesture. The contest rules, he said, pulling a folded paper from his pocket, which I was given as a judge, specifically encourage creativity, originality, and personal effort. Interesting that you'd interpret that to mean most expensive purchase. The crowd that had gathered to watch Victoria's mockery of Tommy's costume was growing larger now, but for a very different reason. People had begun to recognize the action star, and phones were being raised to record what was unfolding. "You know what I see when I look at this costume?" Statham continued, his voice carrying genuine appreciation. "I see hours of research, problem-solving, and creativity. I see a parent and child working together, learning together. Tell me, Tommy, how long did it take you to figure out the LED placement?" Tommy, standing straighter now, explained how he and his mother had experimented with different arrangements, how they had learned about circuits and power distribution, how each failure had led to a better solution. Victoria attempted one last time to maintain her position. "Well, certainly that's all very educational. But this is a costume contest, not a science fair. Some of us chose to give our children the advantage of professional quality." "Advantage?" Statham's voice carried a quiet thunder that silenced her instantly. "Let's talk about advantage. Your son's costume, impressive as it looks, taught him what exactly? How to swipe a credit card. Meanwhile, this young man learned engineering, problem-solving, persistence, and creativity. Which of those sounds more advantageous for a child's development?" The action star turned to address the growing crowd directly. "You know what I've learned in my career? The most impressive things aren't the ones that cost the most. They're the ones that required the most heart, the most creativity, the most genuine effort." Sarah Chen watched in amazement as her son's homemade costume, which minutes ago had been the subject of ridicule, was now being praised by one of Hollywood's biggest stars. But more importantly, she saw Tommy's pride returning, his shoulders straightening, his smile reappearing. "But surely," another parent from Victoria's group attempted to interject, "you can't suggest that a homemade costume belongs alongside professional ones in a competition?" Statham's response was measured but firm. "Actually, that's exactly what I'm suggesting. In fact..." He paused, reaching into his pocket and pulling out his phone. "Let me make a call." The crowd watched in curious silence as he dialed a number. "Dave? Yeah, it's Jason. Remember that costume department tour we discussed for the new film? How'd you like to give it to a young engineer instead?" "Yeah, I've got someone here who's done some impressive work with cardboard and LEDs. Might teach your team a thing or two about creative problem solving." Tommy's eyes widened as he realized what was happening. Statham covered the phone's microphone and turned to him. "How'd you like to see how Hollywood costumes are made? Maybe show them a few of your cardboard engineering tricks." Victoria Blackwood's face had lost its superior expression, replaced by a mix of embarrassment and dawning horror as she finally fully recognized who had witnessed her cruel behavior. Her son Trevor, still in his expensive Spider-Man costume, was looking at Tommy's homemade Iron Man suit with new interest. "Mom," Trevor whispered, tugging at Victoria's sleeve, "could you help me make something next year? Like Tommy and his mom did?" The question seemed to hit Victoria harder than any of Statham's words had. She looked at her son, then at Tommy's costume, seeing it properly for the first time, not as a crafts project to be mocked, but as evidence of time spent together, of learning and creating as parent and child. Statham finished his phone call and turned back to the gathered crowd. "You know what impressed me most about this costume?" he asked, his voice carrying easily through the now silent courtyard. "It's not just the engineering, though that's remarkable. It's not just the creativity, though that's obvious to anyone who really looks. It's the fact that every part of it represents time spent together, problems solved together, creativity shared between parent and child." He gestured to the expensive store-bought costumes surrounding them. "Nothing wrong with these costumes. They're well-made, look great. But they're missing something essential, the story of their creation. Tommy's costume has a story behind every piece, every solution, every light placement. That's what makes it special." The carnival's official start time was approaching, and more families were arriving, immediately sensing that something significant was happening in the courtyard. The story of what had occurred was already spreading through whispers and social media posts. But Statham wasn't finished. His next words would transform not just the evening but the entire culture of Westbrook Academy's approach to student creativity and parent involvement. The action star was about to demonstrate that sometimes the most powerful scenes don't involve physical combat, but rather the courage to stand up for what's right and the wisdom to teach others a better way. The evening air at Westbrook Academy's Halloween Carnival had grown electric with anticipation as Jason Statham prepared to address the growing crowd. The action star's defense of Tommy Chen's homemade Iron Man costume had already transformed the atmosphere, but what came next would change not just one evening, but an entire school's culture. Before we officially start this carnival, Statham began, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had made him famous, I'd like to propose something. Instead of just judging costumes, why don't we have each participant share the story behind their costume? What it means to them, how they chose it, what went into creating or selecting it. The suggestion sent a ripple through the crowd. Victoria Blackwood, still recovering from her earlier humiliation, shifted uncomfortably. Her son Trevor, however, was looking at Tommy's costume with growing fascination, particularly the way the homemade LED lights created unique patterns of illumination. Tommy, Statham continued, would you be willing to show everyone how you engineered those joints? Maybe explain some of the problems you solved along the way. The boy who had been nearly in tears just minutes ago now stood straighter, pride returning to his posture. With growing confidence, he began demonstrating how he and his mother had figured out how to make the cardboard pieces move without breaking, how they had solved the challenge of weight distribution, how each failure had led to a better solution. As Tommy spoke, something remarkable began to happen. Other students started gathering around, genuinely interested in the engineering behind the costume. Even some parents who had earlier joined in Victoria's mockery found themselves impressed by the complexity of thought that had gone into the homemade creation. You know what this reminds me of? Statham asked the assembled crowd. Every film I've worked on starts with people solving problems creatively. Sometimes with big budgets, sometimes with whatever they can find. But the best solutions often come from thinking differently, from seeing possibilities in ordinary materials. He turned to address the parents directly. Your children don't need expensive costumes to be creative. They need encouragement, support, and the freedom to try, fail, and try again. That's what I see in this costume, not just cardboard and LED lights, but hours of learning, growing, and creating together. Victoria Blackwood, watching her son's growing interest in Tommy's creation, seemed to be undergoing her own transformation. The superior smirk had vanished, replaced by something that looked almost like regret. Trevor, she said quietly to her son, would you like to learn how to make something like that? We could try together next time. The boy's face lit up with genuine excitement, not the practiced enthusiasm he usually showed for expensive purchases, but real interest in creating something with his own hands. Statham overheard this exchange and built upon it. You know what we could do? He suggested. Why not start a workshop series? Parents and kids working together, learning to create costumes and props. I know some people in the film industry who'd be happy to share their knowledge. The idea caught fire immediately. Parents who had been focused on outdoing each other with expensive purchases began discussing possibilities for collaborative creation. The school principal, who had arrived during the commotion, stepped forward to offer the art room for weekend workshops. But the most powerful moment came when Victoria Blackwood, her usual arrogance replaced by genuine humility, approached Sarah and Tommy Chen. I owe you both an apology, she said, her voice carrying real remorse. What I did was cruel and short-sighted. Tommy, would you be willing to show Trevor how you design those joints? Maybe we could learn from you both. The request, made sincerely and without condescension, marked a turning point in the evening. Tommy, showing a maturity beyond his years, nodded acceptance of the apology and began enthusiastically explaining his design process to Trevor. Statham watched this transformation with quiet satisfaction. You see, he said to the gathered crowd, this is what happens when we stop competing and start creating together. Every person here has something to teach and something to learn. The carnival's official opening was approaching, but the event had already been transformed into something more meaningful than a costume contest. Parents who had arrived ready to showcase their purchasing power were now discussing ways to collaborate on future projects. Sarah Chen, watching her son confidently explain his engineering solutions to an increasingly interested audience, felt tears of a different kind forming in her eyes. The evening that had started with humiliation had become a testament to the power of creativity, kindness, and the wisdom to see value beyond price tags. The school principal, sensing the moment's significance, made an announcement that would ensure the evening's lessons lasted beyond the carnival. Starting next month, she declared, we'll be launching the Westbrook Makers Program. Parents and students working together to create, not just purchase. Mr. Statham has generously offered to connect us with industry professionals who can share their knowledge. Victoria Blackwood, in a move that surprised everyone, was the first to volunteer as a program coordinator. I have organizational experience, she said, her usual assertiveness now tempered with humility. Maybe I could help structure the workshops, make sure everyone has access to materials and opportunities. The transformation in the atmosphere was palpable. Children who had been comparing price tags were now examining each other's costumes for creative solutions and unique ideas. Parents who had been locked in silent competition were discussing ways to share resources and knowledge. Statham moved through the crowd, continuing to engage with students and parents, but his attention kept returning to Tommy and his mother. The boy was now surrounded by classmates, explaining his design process with growing confidence, while Sarah watched with quiet pride. You know what makes this costume special? Statham asked the gathered students. It's not just the engineering or the creativity. It's the story behind it, the hours spent learning together, solving problems together, creating something unique. That's worth more than any price tag. The evening continued, but it was no longer just a costume contest. It had become a celebration of creativity, collaboration, and the power of seeing value in unexpected places. Students who had arrived seeking validation through expensive costumes were now excited about the possibility of creating something themselves. Victoria Blackwood's group of followers had dispersed, many of them joining different conversations about creative possibilities and future projects. The social hierarchy that had seemed so important at the start of the evening had been replaced by something more valuable, a community of parents and children eager to learn and create together. As the official judging time approached, Statham made one final announcement that would cement the evening's transformation. Tonight, we're going to do something different. Instead of just looking at the final product, we're going to celebrate the stories behind these costumes. The learning, the creativity, the collaboration that went into them. The action star's words carried the weight of someone who understood that true value isn't measured in dollars but in dedication, creativity, and the courage to try something different. The carnival that had threatened to become another showcase of wealth and status had been transformed into something far more meaningful, a celebration of creativity, collaboration, and the power of standing up for what's right. 6 months after Jason Statham's unexpected appearance at the Westbrook Academy Halloween Carnival, the school's art room was buzzing with activity. The space that had once been used only for traditional art classes had been transformed into a maker's workshop, where parents and children worked together creating everything from costumes to props for the school play. Tommy Chin stood at one of the work tables, confidently demonstrating cardboard engineering techniques to a group of interested students and parents. His mother Sarah, watching from nearby, could hardly believe the transformation from that October evening when they had almost left the carnival in tears. The Westbrook Makers Program, born from Statham's intervention, had become the school's most popular activity. Every weekend, families gathered to learn, create, and collaborate, breaking down the social barriers that had once divided the school community. Victoria Blackwood, who had orchestrated the mockery of Tommy's costume 6 months ago, had undergone perhaps the most remarkable transformation. As the program's coordinator, she had channeled her organizational skills into ensuring every family had access to materials and opportunities, regardless of their financial situation. You know what amazes me most? Victoria said to Sarah as they watched their sons working together on a project. We spent years competing over who could buy the most impressive things, when all along, the most valuable experiences were the ones we could create together. The room was filled with evidence of this new philosophy. Expensive store-bought costumes had been replaced by creative collaborations between parents and children. Students who had once judged each other by brand names now evaluated ideas based on innovation and effort. Trevor Blackwood, once known for having the most expensive everything, had become one of the program's most enthusiastic participants. The boy who had worn a professional Spider-Man costume to the carnival was now proudly wearing a homemade Iron Man suit he had created with his mother's help, using techniques learned from Tommy. Jason Statham had kept his promise to connect the school with industry professionals. The walls of the art room were decorated with photos of students visiting movie sets, learning from costume designers, and exploring the creative side of film production. But more importantly, these visits had taught them that creativity and problem-solving mattered more than expensive materials. "Remember when we thought this was just about costumes?" Sarah asked, watching Tommy help another student figure out an LED wiring problem. "It's become so much more than that." She was right. The program had expanded beyond costumes to include all sorts of creative projects. Students were learning engineering, electronics, design principles, and most importantly, the value of collaboration and mutual respect. The school principal, who had initially been skeptical about dedicating so much space and time to the program, now used it as a model for other schools. "What we've learned," she explained to visiting educators, "is that when you give children the opportunity to create rather than just consume, they develop skills that go far beyond any single project." Victoria, overhearing this, added her own perspective. "We used to think we were helping our children by buying them the best of everything. But watching them learn to solve problems, to work through failures, to create something from nothing, that's worth more than any purchase." The impact had spread beyond the school walls. Parents reported that their children were applying their maker mindset to other areas of their lives, approaching challenges with creativity and resilience rather than looking for quick purchases to solve problems. Tommy had become something of a legend at Westbrook. Not because of his family's wealth or status, but because of his ability to see possibilities where others saw limitations. His original Iron Man costume, carefully preserved in a display case in the school lobby, had become a symbol of the transformation in the school's culture. "You know what the best part is?" Tommy said to a group of younger students he was mentoring. "It's not about making things perfect. It's about trying ideas, learning from mistakes, and making something that's uniquely yours." The afternoon's activities were interrupted by an unexpected visitor. Jason Statham, true to his word about supporting the program, had dropped by to check on its progress. The action star moved through the room quietly, observing the projects underway, stopping occasionally to ask questions or offer encouragement. "This," he said, gesturing to the busy workshop, "this is what success looks like. Not buying the most expensive things, but creating something meaningful together." Victoria approached him, her demeanor vastly different from their first encounter. "Thank you," she said simply. "Not just for starting this, but for showing us what we were missing. We were so focused on impressing each other that we forgot what really matters." Statham's response captured the essence of what the program had become. "You know what I've learned in my career? The most valuable things aren't the ones you can buy, they're the ones you create, the relationships you build, the moments you share while making something together." The action star moved through the room, stopping to examine various projects. At each table, he found examples of what he had hoped to inspire that October evening: parents and children working together, learning together, creating together. Tommy's latest project caught his attention: a complex mechanism made from cardboard and recycled materials. "Still solving problems with cardboard, I see," Statham commented with approval. "It's not about the materials," Tommy replied, echoing the lesson he had learned and now taught others. "It's about seeing possibilities and not being afraid to try new ideas." The afternoon concluded with a showcase of recent projects. Parents and children presented their creations, but more importantly, they shared the stories of collaboration, problem-solving, and learning that had gone into each piece. Victoria and Trevor Blackwood presented last, showing the Iron Man costume they had created together. 6 months ago, Victoria admitted to the group, "I would have thought it beneath us to make something by hand. Now I understand that the real value isn't in what you spend, it's in what you learn and create together." As families began packing up their projects, Statham pulled Sarah and Tommy aside. "You know," he said quietly, "what happened that night at the carnival, that wasn't just about a costume. It was about having the courage to be different, to create something genuine in a world that often values appearance over substance." The action star's words resonated through the room, capturing the transformation that had taken place not just in the school, but in the mindsets of everyone involved. What had started as a defense of one child's homemade costume had become a movement that changed how an entire community thought about value, creativity, and the importance of working together. As the last families left the art room that afternoon, the space remained filled with evidence of the program's success, not just in the projects scattered around the tables, but in the relationships built, the barriers broken down, and the understanding that true worth isn't measured in price tags but in the effort, creativity, and collaboration that go into creating something meaningful. The story of that Halloween carnival had become more than just a tale of standing up to mockery. It had become a blueprint for transforming competition into collaboration, consumption into creation, and social hierarchy into community. And it all started because one action star chose to defend a child's creative effort, proving that sometimes the most powerful acts of heroism involve not physical strength, but the courage to stand up for what truly matters.